Hey there, and welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm Lenny.
And I'm Maria, your expert guide for today.
So today we're going deep on something that might surprise you a little bit.
Yeah, it might even shock some people.
We're talking about the hidden world of plant toxins.
Plant toxins.
You might be thinking, hold on a second. Aren't plants supposed to be good for us?
That's what we've always heard, right? Eat your fruits and veggies.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
get this, according to a ton of research we've been digging into, all edible plants contain a whole arsenal of defense chemicals,
Oh, yeah, they've got tons of these things.
anti-nutrients, and even pesticide residues that can actually be harmful to humans.
It's true. It's not just about eating your greens anymore.
No, not at all. It's a whole new perspective on what we eat, and
But you really,
we're here to unpack the science behind it all.
let's get into it.
All right, so let's start with the fundamentals. Plants can't run away from danger.
Nope, they're stuck.
They can't hide.
Right.
So they've evolved these really sophisticated defense mechanisms to protect themselves.
Exactly. It's like chemical warfare out there.
Chemical warfare. And we're talking about things like defense chemicals that can
They can
actually
do a lot of damage.
mess with our hormones, damage your cells, and even impact fertility.
It's wild, and we're not just talking about a few stray chemicals here and there. We're talking thousands of these compounds
Thousands.
in all kinds of edible plants.
Wow. Okay, now you might be thinking to yourself, well, I eat salads all the time and I feel fine.
Right. We hear that a lot.
So what's the deal?
Well, here's the thing. Our bodies are actually pretty good at neutralizing a lot of these toxins,
Okay.
especially if we're getting the right nutrients from animal-based foods.
Oh, okay.
But even then, this constant detox process takes a toll. It's like running a marathon every day. You might be able to do it,
Right.
but it's definitely going to wear you down over time.
I can imagine it takes a lot of energy to keep detoxifying.
It does for sure.
Okay. And then there are anti-nutrients, these sneaky compounds
Yeah.
that essentially,
They're little thieves.
yeah, they latch onto the good stuff in our food,
Uh-huh. The stuff we need.
like minerals and proteins, and make
Yeah.
them basically useless to our bodies.
Yep. They bind to them, and our bodies can't absorb them.
So it's like we're eating all the right things, but not actually getting the benefits.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like trying to fill a leaky bucket. You keep pouring in, but it just keeps leaking out.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Thanks.
And to make matters worse, all the edible plants we eat today
Right.
are
Every single one.
genetically modified
Uh-huh.
and loaded with pesticide residues.
Which just adds to the toxic burden.
Right, so it's like this multi-layered problem.
Exactly.
We've got the plant's own defenses,
Yeah.
then the genetic modifications,
Uh-huh.
and then the pesticides on top of that.
It all adds up.
Yeah. So the big takeaway here is that plant nutrients just aren't a perfect match for our bodies.
They're not.
We're designed to thrive on
Animal-based foods?
animal-based foods, which provide the essential building blocks we need.
In a form that's easily absorbed and used.
Yeah, readily available.
Yes, much more bioavailable.
So what does this all mean for you?
Well, it's not about swearing off plants completely.
No, of course not.
But it does raise some important questions about,
Yeah.
the balance of our diets
Uh-huh.
and the long-term impact of these plant toxins on our health.
It's definitely something to think about, and we're just scratching the surface here.
Oh, yeah, we've got a lot more to unpack.
So much more, so stay tuned for part 2 of this deep dive where
We'll really get into it.
we'll explore even more about the hidden world of plant toxins.
It's going to be good.
It's going to be fascinating, so stay tuned. All right, so we've been talking about all these plant toxins
Yeah.
and how they can impact us, but before we go any further, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier
Okay.
about how our bodies are actually designed to run on animal-based nutrients.
Right.
Can you expand on that a bit?
Sure. So when we look at the evidence from, biology, anatomy, even anthropology,
Uh-huh.
it becomes pretty clear that humans are obligate hypercarnivores.
Obligate hypercarnivores. What does
Yeah.
that even mean?
It means our bodies are specifically adapted to thrive on a diet.
Okay.
That's mostly, if not entirely, made up of animal-based foods.
So we're basically designed to be meat eaters.
Pretty much, yeah.
But what about all the messages we hear about, fruits and veggies being so important for our health?
Well, that's the message we've all been given, right?
Right.
But it's not the whole story.
Okay.
When you really look at the science, you see that our digestive systems, our teeth, even our brains,
Wow.
point to a long evolutionary history of eating mostly animal foods.
Interesting. So if our bodies are so well suited to animal foods, why do so many people seem to struggle with health issues when they eat a lot of meat?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it comes down to a couple of things.
Okay.
First, the meat most people are eating today is just not the same quality as the meat our ancestors ate.
So you're saying it's not just about eating any meat.
Exactly.
There's more to it.
Right. It's about the source of the meat, the way the animals were raised, what they were fed.
I see.
All of that plays a role.
So the meat itself might be lacking in nutrients or even containing things that aren't so good for us.
Exactly like antibiotics or hormones.
Got it. And then there's the issue of what people are eating along with that meat.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
Like, are they loading up on processed foods and sugary drinks?
Right. Even if they're eating more meat, if they're still eating a lot of those other things, it's not going to be a healthy balance.
So it's about making a fundamental shift in how we approach food and nutrition.
Absolutely. It's about prioritizing nutrient-dense whole foods and minimizing the stuff that's just not good for us.
Okay, I'm starting to get the bigger picture here. So let's circle back to those plant toxins for a minute.
Okay.
You said that even if we could somehow magically remove all the potential toxins from plants,
Mm-hmm.
our bodies still wouldn't be as efficient at utilizing those nutrients compared to animal-based nutrients.
Right.
Why is that?
Well, remember, those plant nutrients are fundamentally different in their chemical structure.
Oh.
They don't have the same carbon-hydrogen bonds that our bodies recognize and use so easily.
So it's not just about whether or not there are toxins present. It's about how compatible those nutrients are with our biology.
Exactly.
Our bodies have to work a lot harder to convert those plant-based nutrients into something we can actually use.
They do. And that conversion process takes energy, and it's never 100% efficient.
It's almost like we're forcing our bodies to run on the wrong type of fuel.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
And the more we rely on those less compatible fuels,
Yeah.
the more we stress our system and potentially create imbalances.
It's like putting diesel in a gas car.
Right. It might run for a little while, but it's not going to run well.
Exactly.
And it could cause some serious damage in the long run.
For sure.
Okay, this is making a lot more sense now, but I have to ask, what about all the hype around antioxidants from plants?
Oh.
Aren't those supposed to be good for us?
Well, the thing about antioxidants is it's a lot more complicated than just eat more antioxidants.
So it's not as simple as just loading up on fruits and veggies to boost our antioxidant levels.
Right. In fact, some research suggests that too many plant-based antioxidants might actually have the opposite effect.
Really?
Yeah, they can become pro-oxidant.
Antioxidant. But I thought antioxidants were supposed to protect us from oxidation.
They are, but it's all about balance.
Okay.
When we flood our bodies with antioxidants from outside sources, it can actually mess with our own internal antioxidant systems.
So it's like taking too much of a good thing can backfire.
Exactly.
Wow, that's interesting. So it sounds like we need to be careful about not just the quantity of antioxidants we're getting,
Right.
but also the source
And the tie-up.
and making sure it's aligned with our biology.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance.
So if we're trying to minimize plant toxins and prioritize a more species-appropriate diet, does that mean we have to completely eliminate plants from our plates?
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's not about demonizing plants or going to extremes.
Yeah.
It's about understanding their potential impact
Okay.
and making informed choices.
So there might be a place for some plants in a healthy diet, but it's about being mindful and selective
Right.
and paying attention to how our bodies respond.
Exactly. Some people can handle more plants than others.
It seems like a personalized approach is really important here.
Absolutely. There's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to diet.
That makes sense.
We all have different genetics, lifestyles, and levels of metabolic health.
Right. So what works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly.
So if someone's interested in exploring this further, where would you recommend they start?
Well, there are tons of great resources available online.
Like what?
Books, articles, podcasts, even entire communities dedicated to this way of eating.
So there's a whole world out there for people to discover.
There really is.
And I bet we can find some links to share with our listeners.
Oh, definitely.
And of course, it's always a good idea to work with a knowledgeable healthcare professional,
Absolutely.
someone who can guide you and make sure you're meeting your individual needs.
Right, because everyone is different.
Well, it sounds like we've reached the bottom of this deep dive.
We have.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I think the most important thing to remember is that this isn't about being dogmatic or rigid.
Right.
It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge, questioning assumptions,
Yeah,
and making choices that truly support our health and well-being.
I love that. Well said. So on that note, we'll leave you to ponder these ideas
Yes.
and continue your own exploration of this fascinating topic. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. All right, so we've talked about all these potential downsides of plants.
Right, all their defenses and how they can impact us.
And we even touched on this idea that humans might actually be better suited to a more animal-based diet.
Yeah, we're designed for it, really.
But how do we actually put all this information together, in a practical way?
That's a big question, right? What do we do with this new understanding?
Exactly. It's one thing to talk about the science, but how do we apply it to our everyday lives?
Well, I think the first step is really shifting our perspective.
Okay, so what do you mean by that?
Instead of assuming we need to eat plants for health,
Right, which is what we've always been told.
exactly, let's kind of flip that on its head.
Okay, so we're starting from scratch.
Kind of, yeah. Let's start with the idea that our bodies are designed to thrive on animal-based foods.
Okay,
That's our baseline.
got it.
And then from there, we can experiment with adding in plant-based foods in a way that feels good for us.
So it's not about eliminating plants completely.
No, not at all.
It's more about being mindful and intentional about the ones we choose to include.
Exactly. It's about listening to our bodies and paying attention to how we feel after we eat different things.
Makes sense because some people might be totally fine with certain plants,
Right.
while others might be more sensitive.
Exactly.
So it really seems like a lot of this comes down to individual experimentation and just being aware of how our bodies respond.
Absolutely. There's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to diet.
Right, because we're all different.
We have different genetics, lifestyles, different levels of metabolic health.
So what works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly.
So if someone's listening and they're thinking, okay, this is really interesting,
Yeah.
where should they go to learn more?
Oh, there are so many great resources out there.
Like what?
Well, there are tons of books and articles,
Yeah.
podcasts, even entire communities dedicated to exploring animal-based diets.
Wow. So there's a whole world out there for people to discover.
There really is.
And I bet we can even find some links to share with our listeners in the show notes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And of course, working with a knowledgeable healthcare professional is always a good idea.
Absolutely.
They can help guide you and make sure you're meeting all your individual needs.
Right, because everyone is different.
Well, it sounds like we've reached the bottom of this deep dive.
We have.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I think it's just important to remember that this isn't about dogma or being rigid.
Right.
It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge, questioning assumptions,
Yeah.
and making choices that truly support our health and well-being.
I love that. Beautifully said. So on that note, we'll leave you to ponder these ideas and continue your own exploration of this fascinating topic. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.